Welcome to the chosen bloom. You felt it, haven't you? The pause in conversation when you enter a room, the sideways glance when you decline another invitation, the faint unease when you admit you spent the weekend alone and enjoyed every moment of it. These are not random reactions. They reveal a hidden truth when a man no longer depends on the crowd, when he discovers peace in his own company, strength in silence, and meaning in solitude. He unsettles the world around him. He unsettles the world around him. Society does not applaud him. It does not understand him. It resents him. Carl Jung, the great psychologist who journeyed into the darkest chambers of the human mind, understood this tension. He knew that a man who embraces solitude is not merely unusual, he is a disruption. His existence challenges the very foundation on which collective life rests. And that disruption feels dangerous. But dangerous in what way? Why should a man's quiet preference for aloneness provoke such resistance, even hostility? Consider this. It is Friday night. The world gathers in bars, parties, and endless chatter. Yet somewhere, a man sits at home not restless, not envious, not scrolling through lives he wishes he lived.
He is reading, creating, thinking, or simply resting in silence.
Content, whole, free. And that is precisely what unsettles others.
For his stillness reflects what most spend their lives fleeing, the weight of their own inner world.
Jung taught that solitude is not emptiness, it is a summons. It compels a man to face what Jung called the unconscious mind. He warned, your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. And what lies within is not always gentle. It is where the shadow lives, where buried fears, unspoken desires, and suppressed truths wait in silence. Most men cannot bear this weight, so they drown it out with noise. They saturate their days with busyness, their nights with distractions, their minds with other people's opinions, anything to avoid meeting themselves in the dark. But the man who learns to love solitude has already walked through that darkness.
He has sat with his shadow, endured the silence, and returned changed.
Calmer, wiser, more anchored in himself. And when he steps into a room, his presence unsettles others, not because of what he says, but because of what he silently represents. His life exposes the truth they fight to bury. That is why the jokes about being antisocial come so quickly. That is why the subject shifts so fast. Their laughter is not against you. It is their shield, their way of defending themselves from the reflection you cast. And here lies the deeper threat to society. Human interactions are rarely neutral. They rest on hidden exchanges of power.
Approval, guilt, the fear of missing out, these are the silent levers people use to keep one another bound to the crowd.
The unspoken message is always the same. If you do not join us, you will lose something essential. Everyone will be there except you. Don't you want to be part of the group? On the surface, these sound like harmless invitations. But beneath them lies a subtle mechanism of control. They are not calls to friendship. They are reminders of conformity. And for most, they work. Jung wrote often about individuation, the lifelong process of uniting the scattered pieces of the psyche into one whole self. He believed it to be the very heart of human development. Individuation begins the moment you stop borrowing identity from the crowd and start drawing it from within. And once a man reaches that place, he becomes nearly untouchable. He no longer depends on approval to steady his worth. He does not need to be included to feel valued. He does not seek validation to know who he is. This kind of man terrifies those who build their power on the compliance of others. Because what happens when you cannot be guilted into attending? When the subtle pressure of exclusion no longer works. When your joy remains intact with or without their attention, the entire power structure begins to collapse. Those who rely on it to feel secure suddenly find themselves powerless and afraid. And you've felt this shift, haven't you? That moment when you stopped caring about being invited, when you realized solitude did not diminish you but nourished you. That moment you saw you could be happy without the noise. It was then the hostility sharpened, because silence to most is unbearable. Not for what it hides, but for what it reveals. When the noise dies down, when the endless scrolling and constant chatter finally fade, the one voice left is the one people dread most, their own. The man who loves solitude has made peace with silence. He has peeled back the layers that distractions once concealed. He has listened to his own thoughts, felt the full weight of his emotions, confronted truths others spent lifetimes avoiding.
And because he is unshaken by quiet, his very presence magnifies the discomfort of those who are.
Think back to the last time someone discovered you spent an evening alone by choice, not circumstance. Recall their reaction, the puzzled questions, the faint disapproval, the assumption that something must be wrong with you. You're so quiet. What are you thinking? Say something. Why don't you ever talk? These are not questions of curiosity. They are demands. Pleas for you to relieve the tension that your silence exposes. For when someone is truly at ease in stillness, it reveals how desperate others are to drown it out. Jung saw this clearly. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, he wrote. Most people live in constant flight from reflection. They flood their lives with noise, both literal and symbolic, to avoid the confrontation that waits in stillness. But the man of solitude disrupts this pattern. His calm creates space, and in that space suppressed thoughts and buried emotions rise to the surface. Instead of seizing the chance to grow, most recoil. They lash out, not because of him, but because of what he awakens within them. You've witnessed it, the way people project their restlessness onto your calm, the way they mistake your ease with silence, as silent judgment of their dependence on noise. And in a sense, they are right. Not judged by you, but by their own conscience, by the mirror you unwillingly hold before them. For society is built on predictable rhythms of distraction and control. And your silence breaks the rhythm. Go to school. Get at a job. Find someone. Get married. Have children. Retire. Die. Along the way, take part in the endless rituals, the parties, the gatherings, the rehearsed displays of belonging that signal you are normal. Jung saw these as collective programming, social scripts designed to keep order, to ensure society runs without disruption. Most follow them, not because their hearts long to, but because the cost of deviation feels unbearable. And yet, there are those who listen to another voice entirely. Jung called it the self, a higher principle beyond the ego, beyond expectation. The privilege of a lifetime, he wrote, is to become who you truly are. This self knows what nourishes you, what fulfills you, what draws you closer to wholeness. The man who learns to hear it cannot be swayed by popularity or convenience, cannot be bribed by safety or shamed into compliance. He follows a compass others cannot see. Such a man is unpredictable.
And unpredictability disturbs the order.
For if someone will not bend to the group, how can the group control him? If he can thrive outside the system, what does that reveal about the system itself? This is why suspicion follows him. You felt it, the way eyes narrow when you make choices that defy the script, the way voices rise with accusations. You're selfish. You're antisocial. You think you're better than everyone else. But these charges are not truly about you. They are echoes of fear that your independence unmasks their dependence. Fear that your contentment outside the script proves the script was never necessary. For much of modern life runs on quiet transactions. I give you attention. You give me validation. And the man who no longer trades in this economy becomes a threat to its foundation. I give you emotional support. You make me feel needed. I join your drama. You join mine. Most relationships run on this unspoken exchange, an intricate web of dependency mistaken for true connection. But the man who loves solitude sees through it. He has learned to generate his own validation, to steady his own emotions, to shape his own purpose. He no longer depends on the endless barter of attention that keeps others trapped in shallow ties. And in doing so, he reveals how hollow those transactions truly are. Think of the last time someone accused you of being distant, cold, or uncaring simply because you did not require their constant attention. Recall their anger when you were genuinely content without their drama or validation. That anger was never about you. It was about the mirror you held before them, reflecting back their dependence. For if you can thrive without playing their game, what does that say about the game itself? Jung saw this clearly. He taught that genuine connection arises not from need, but from wholeness. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The solitary man embodies this principle. He does not enter relationships to complete himself. He enters whole, and in doing so brings the possibility of true transformation. Yet this very completeness unsettles others. For what role is left for those who define themselves by being indispensable, by being needed? If you're already whole, where do they fit? You have felt this resentment, the skepticism when you admit you spent a weekend alone and enjoyed it, the questioning tone when you decline invitations without apology. Their resistance is not to your choices. It is to the independence those choices reveal. Notice how offended people can become at your fulfillment without them. To admit your wholeness would mean questioning their own ties often woven from mutual neediness rather than true connection. It is easier to dismiss you as deficient than to face that possibility. And here lies what society prefers you never discover. Connection is not always a need. We are told endlessly that humans are social creatures, that isolation breeds despair, that happiness depends on others. There is truth in these claims, but not the whole truth. They blur the vital distinction between forced isolation and chosen solitude. The man who cherishes solitude is not cut off. He is selective. He has uncovered a truth that unsettles the very foundation of social belief, that dependency is not a requirement for psychological health. His life itself becomes evidence against the myth. And this makes others deeply uneasy. Because if you can live joyfully without constant interaction, what does that reveal about the relationships they endure out of duty, out of fear, out of habit? What does it say about the obligations they uphold that drain rather than nourish them? Your independence becomes undeniable proof. Dependence is not necessity, it is choice. And choice means it can be changed. That thought both liberates and terrifies. Far easier to cling to the narrative that dependency is inescapable than to admit one has chosen chains over freedom. Jung taught that true psychological health is found here, in the ability to be alone without loneliness and to be with others without losing yourself. Jung captured it with precision. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. The solitary man has mastered this truth. His ease in solitude does not diminish connection, it refines it. Because he does not need company, his relationships become chosen, deliberate, authentic. Yet this very balance threatens those who swing restlessly between frantic social seeking and aching isolation. They cannot imagine a middle ground, for they have never learned to rest comfortably within themselves. And you know this truth, don't you? The deep satisfaction of choosing your interactions instead of defaulting to them. The peace of enjoying company without being enslaved to it. The strength of knowing you are whole with or without external validation. This knowledge makes you unsettling in a society built on the assumption that people will always choose belonging over independence, inclusion over authenticity. When people encounter what they cannot control, they project their own fears onto it. The man who loves solitude becomes a canvas for society's hidden anxieties about loneliness, about independence, about self-sufficiency. Rather than examining their own discomfort, they turn it into accusations. He must be depressed. He must be hiding something. But these judgments reveal far more about the speaker than the solitary man. The one who assumes solitude means depression is often running from their own sadness. The one who believes independence equals arrogance is often insecure about their own dependence. The one who insists choosing solitude equals hatred of people is often conflicted about their own need for them. Jung devoted his life to studying these defense mechanisms, these ways the mind protects itself from truths too heavy to face. Jung understood this with piercing clarity. We often despise in others what we fear to acknowledge in ourselves. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. The hostility directed at the solitary man is rarely about him.
It is about the shadow. Others refuse to face their own fear of loneliness, their unspoken hunger for freedom, their resentment of empty obligations, their buried longing for true solitude.
Instead of integrating these disowned parts, they exile them and project them outward. You become the vessel, the safe target, the symbol of what they suppress. By condemning you, they avoid confronting themselves. This is why the reactions to your solitary nature often feel exaggerated. You are not meeting their opinion, you are colliding with their hidden war against their own rejected desires for independence and authenticity. And society at large relies on this suppression. Stability depends on agreement, shared norms, shared definitions of what is acceptable, desirable, normal. But when someone steps outside and flourishes, the illusion trembles. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, the inner tension when two conflicting beliefs collide. The solitary man embodies this tension. If he can be joyful, healthy, and fulfilled without conforming, what does that say about the very norms meant to guarantee those things? If he thrives without constant validation, perhaps validation was never as essential as everyone believed. If a man can find meaning in solitude, then perhaps the fear of being alone is not natural at all but learned. And that possibility shakes the foundation of collective belief. For many have built entire lives on the conviction that constant connection is the key to happiness. They have sacrificed dreams, endured compromises, and submitted to expectations, all under the assumption that belonging was mandatory. Your quiet fulfillment suggests otherwise. And if they were wrong about this, what else might they be wrong about? Which rules are truly necessary and which are cages disguised as norms? These questions are dangerous to those whose very identity rests on conformity. It is far safer for them to pathologize your solitude than to confront their own dependency. You become the road not taken, the choice they never realized was possible, the freedom they unknowingly surrendered. Their hostility is not about your life. It is about the haunting awareness that perhaps they have been more social, more compliant, more self-denying than they ever wanted to be. Here, Jung's concept of the shadow fits with precision. The shadow is everything we reject, repress, or deny within ourselves. And in our hypersocial age, the shadow is often filled with the very things society has branded unhealthy: the desire for solitude, the hunger for independence, the longing for authentic self-reflection. These are painted as selfish, antisocial, even dangerous, so people bury them. They silence their own needs. They mistake exhaustion for fulfillment because they have been told that this is what healthy people do. But the shadow never disappears. Repressed, it does not die, it waits. And when someone lives openly what others have buried, all of that hidden weight is projected outward. The man who loves solitude becomes more than an individual. He becomes the vessel of society's disowned desire for freedom, authenticity, and selfhood. You have become their shadow made visible. Instead of acknowledging their own hunger for solitude, they condemn yours. Instead of admitting their desire for independence, they pathologize yours. Instead of owning their fatigue from endless obligations, they label your selectivity as dysfunction. This projection protects their fragile identity. By despising these qualities in you, they can go on believing they are generous, social, and connected. They never have to face their own resentment of shallow gatherings or their secret longing for stillness. But projection always carries a cost. The energy they spend resisting you is energy not spent understanding themselves.
The hostility they aim outward shields them from the confrontation waiting within.
You become their scapegoat, their mirror, their reminder of an authenticity they have buried. And authenticity is costly. It demands courage. To live authentically is to walk a path others will not bless. It is to trust the inner voice even when it contradicts the chorus. It is to accept misunderstanding, judgment, even hatred for no other crime than being genuine. The man who loves solitude accepts this cost. He chooses authenticity over approval, self-awareness over conformity, inner fulfillment over external applause. Such choices require strength most never attempt, because authenticity demands the one thing society quietly discourages: thinking for yourself. And when you truly think for yourself, dangerous truths emerge. You discover you don't need as much social interaction as you were told. You find greater joy in fewer, deeper bonds than in many shallow ones. You realize that your own company, once feared, is not only tolerable, but deeply fulfilling. These realizations are not small, they are revolutionary. Such realizations strike at the core of what we assume about human nature, social need, and the pursuit of happiness. They suggest that much of what passes for healthy social behavior may in fact be learned dependency, masked as normalcy. Jung believed the true aim of life was individuation, to become who you truly are, not who others demand you to be. And he warned, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The man who loves solitude often stands further along this path than his critics, and that difference unsettles them. Your authenticity exposes their performance. Your self-knowledge exposes their avoidance. Your willingness to live true reveals their choice to live false. The mirror you hold is not flattering, and few thank you for it. Every authentic soul pays a price. For the solitary man, that price is often social rejection, misunderstanding, and the weight of projections from others' fears. You become the vessel for society's unease about loneliness, independence, and self-sufficiency. But here is the truth Jung knew, and most never grasp: the price of inauthenticity is far greater. To live only by the expectations of others is to forfeit the self. To seek approval above truth is to trade away integrity. To conform outwardly while dying inwardly is the heaviest loss of all. Choosing connection over solitude, when solitude is what you truly need, costs you your well-being. The man who loves solitude refuses that bargain. He accepts the external price in order to preserve his inner authenticity. He would rather be misunderstood than misunderstand himself. He would rather be rejected by others than reject his own nature. He would rather be labeled different than betray his own truth by pretending to be the same. And this is precisely what unsettles those who chose the opposite path. They bartered away authenticity for acceptance, traded self-knowledge for approval, surrendered inner truth for external validation. Your willingness to pay the price they feared to pay forces them to ask whether their trade was worth it. And the quiet answer often unsettles them, because deep down many sense they have compromised too much, sacrificed too much, lost too much of themselves in the endless chase for belonging. Your example becomes a painful reminder of the selves they abandoned, of the choices they might have made, of the life they might have lived if courage had guided them instead of fear. And when something hurts, people do what humans have always done: they attack it. So where does this leave the man who loves solitude? Knowing the psychology behind others' reactions does not erase their sting, but it does strip away the illusion. Their hostility is not truly about you. It is about themselves. When you recognize that people's hostility toward your solitude reveals more about their own fears than about you, the weight shifts. You no longer need to meet judgment with defensiveness. You can meet it with clarity, even compassion. Jung reminded us, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. The solitary man lives by this truth. He does not justify his choices, nor argue for their validity. He does not defend his preference for depth over breadth, quality over quantity, authenticity over approval. His only task is to keep walking with integrity, to honor his need for solitude without apology, to choose relationships that enrich rather than drain, to trust his inner compass even when it contradicts the crowd. This path carries a price: misunderstanding, projection, and suspicion. Some will be threatened by your independence. Some will cast their fears upon your choices. Others will mistake your self-sufficiency for arrogance, your selectivity for rejection. But these are not yours to carry. Your responsibility is singular: to live authentically, to respect others without betraying yourself, and to preserve your integrity no matter how others respond. Jung believed the world desperately needs such individuals, those willing to think independently, to live differently, to chart their own course. The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. To be your own man is a hard business. And yet, it is precisely these individuals who serve as living proof that alternatives exist. They remind us that the status quo is not destiny, that authenticity is possible even when it is costly, and that sometimes the most radical act a man can commit is to be at peace with himself. You are one of those rare individuals. By choosing solitude over conformity, authenticity over approval, depth over surface, you create possibility. Not everyone will welcome this gift, but some will. And for those who recognize in your quiet contentment a reflection of their own unspoken longing, you will not be seen as a threat, but as a beacon. The path of the solitary man is not easy, but it is honest. And in a world that rewards performance over authenticity, appearance over substance, and conformity over individuality, honesty itself becomes a radical act. So, keep walking. Keep choosing truth over pretense. The world needs more people who are brave enough to be genuine, especially when that genuineness unsettles others. Now here is your next step. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We all know someone who has been made to feel wrong for preferring their own company, for needing silence to think, for choosing depth over shallow distraction. Let them know their choice is not only valid, it is vital. Remember, the courage to be authentic is rare. Do not let the discomfort of others tempt you to abandon it. This world does not need more masks. It needs more people who dare to live unmasked, real in a culture of performance, genuine in a world of facades, true to themselves even at the cost of approval. Keep being courageously, authentically you. Yet here lies the deepest irony that Jung understood with crystalline clarity: the man who needs no one inevitably attracts everyone worth knowing. This is not a contradiction. It is the fundamental law of authentic human connection. Consider what happens when you enter a room carrying no agenda, seeking no validation, requiring no approval to feel whole. Your very presence shifts the energy. While others perform, compete, and grasp for attention, you simply exist. And that existence, calm, complete, undemanding, becomes magnetic in ways that desperation never could. People can sense authenticity the way animals sense fear. They feel the difference between someone who approaches them from wholeness versus someone who approaches from emptiness. The needy repel, the complete attract. The desperate chase, the fulfilled are sought. This is why the solitary man, paradoxically, often finds himself surrounded by those hungry for genuine connection. But here's what society never teaches. Authentic attraction works in reverse of what most believe. The more you need someone, the less they want to be needed. The more you chase connection, the faster it flees. Yet the moment you discover you can be genuinely happy alone, not performing happiness, not convincing yourself, but authentically content, others begin gravitating toward that rare energy. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But transformation only occurs when both substances are already complete. When one person brings wholeness to meet another's wholeness, something extraordinary happens. When one brings need to meet another's need, only codependency is born. The solitary man understands this alchemy. Because he has learned to be alone without loneliness, he can be with others without losing himself. Because he generates his own validation, he has surplus to offer rather than deficit to fill. Because his happiness doesn't depend on others, his relationships become gifts rather than transactions. And this terrifies those who have spent lifetimes believing that connection requires dependency. They watch the solitary man form deeper bonds in months than they have formed in years of frantic socializing. They see him attract loyal friendships without effort, while their own relationships remain shallow despite constant maintenance. They witness him decline 10 invitations and receive 20 more, while they accept everything and feel increasingly invisible. The truth they cannot bear to face is this: people don't want to be needed, they want to be chosen. They don't want to fill your emptiness, they want to share in your fullness. They don't want to be your solution, they want to be your addition. And only the man who has made peace with solitude can offer such gifts. For when you no longer need others to complete you, you finally become capable of truly seeing them. When you no longer require their approval to feel worthy, you can appreciate their unique essence without projection. When you no longer depend on their attention to feel alive, you can give them attention that nourishes rather than drains. This is why the deepest friendships, the most passionate loves, the most meaningful connections of your life have likely come not when you were seeking them most desperately, but when you were most at peace with yourself. The universe has a way of bringing together those who have learned to stand alone. And when such individuals meet, they don't complete each other, they multiply each other's wholeness. The man who loves solitude doesn't fear intimacy, he demands authenticity. He doesn't avoid connection, he refuses counterfeit. He doesn't hate people, he simply refuses to betray himself for their comfort. And in doing so, he creates space for the kind of relationships that others spend lifetimes seeking but never find: connections built on truth rather than need, depth rather than dependency, choice rather than desperation. This is the final insult to society's narrative. Not only can you be happy alone, but your aloneness actually makes you better company. History reveals a truth that modern society desperately wants to forget. Every leap forward in human consciousness, every breakthrough that elevated our species, every idea that transformed the world came from minds that dared to think alone. Jung himself spent years in what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of profound solitude where he withdrew from colleagues, patients, even friends, to wrestle with the deepest mysteries of the human psyche. His peers thought he was losing his mind. Instead, he was discovering it. The concepts that would revolutionize psychology, the collective unconscious, archetypes, individuation, emerged not from conference rooms or collaborative discussions, but from the silence of his study, the solitude of his thoughts, the courage to trust his inner voice over the chorus of convention. Nietzsche, walking alone through the mountains of Switzerland, conceived ideas that would reshape philosophy for centuries. All truly great thoughts are conceived while walking, he wrote, understanding that the mind's deepest insights arise not in the chatter of debate, but in the spaciousness of solitude. Tesla, working in obsessive isolation, channeled inventions that literally powered the modern world. Einstein, famously preferring his own company to social gatherings, unraveled the secrets of the universe not through committee, but through contemplation. But here lies the pattern that society refuses to acknowledge. These weren't antisocial outcasts stumbling accidentally upon greatness. They were individuals who recognized a fundamental truth that breakthrough thinking requires breaking away. That innovation demands solitude. That to see what others cannot see, you must be willing to stand where others will not stand, alone with your thoughts, your doubts, your vision. Consider what this means. While the crowd reinforces existing beliefs through constant validation and agreement, the solitary mind questions everything. While groups converge on consensus, the individual diverges toward discovery. While social thinking smooths away rough edges through compromise, solitary thinking preserves the sharp corners where truth cuts deepest. Darwin spent decades in relative isolation developing his theory of evolution, knowing it would scandalize society. Thoreau withdrew to Walden Pond, not to escape life, but to discover what life actually was beneath the noise of civilization. Van Gogh painted in solitude works that no one understood, creating beauty that the world wouldn't appreciate for generations. Each understood that to birth something truly new into the world, you must first conceive it in the quiet chambers of your own consciousness. This is why society fears the solitary man. He represents the possibility of thinking beyond the collective. Every time someone withdraws from the group consensus and returns with a different perspective, he reveals that the group's certainty was merely collective delusion. Every breakthrough born in solitude exposes how little the crowd actually knows. Every innovation that emerges from independent thought proves that following others is the surest path to arriving where everyone else already stands. Yet here is the deeper truth. These solitary geniuses didn't withdraw from humanity, they withdrew for humanity. Their solitude was not selfishness, but service. They understood that to give the world something it has never had, they must become something the world has never seen. They paid the price of loneliness so that future generations might inherit wisdom. They endured the judgment of their contemporaries so that their ideas might outlive their critics. Jung captured this perfectly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming who you truly are requires stepping away from who others expect you to be. It demands the courage to disappoint people in the service of a truth they cannot yet understand. It requires the strength to stand alone while your vision gestates in the darkness of uncertainty. And this is what the modern world has forgotten in its obsession with collaboration, networking, and constant connectivity. We have convinced ourselves that all important thinking happens in groups, that breakthroughs emerge from brainstorming sessions, that wisdom arises from consensus. But history tells a different story. History reveals that the thoughts that matter most, the ones that change everything, almost always begin in the mind of someone sitting alone, thinking differently, daring to question what everyone else accepts as truth. The man who loves solitude stands in this lineage. He may not be destined for historical significance, but he participates in the same essential process, the cultivation of independent thought. Every time he chooses reflection over reaction, contemplation over conversation, depth over distraction, he honors the tradition of those who dared to think for themselves. He becomes part of the eternal rebellion against groupthink, the quiet revolution of consciousness that happens one individual at a time. This is why his solitude threatens others, not because it's strange or unhealthy, but because it's powerful. It represents the possibility that everything they believe might be wrong, that everything they've accepted might be questioned, that the safety of consensus might be the very thing preventing breakthrough. His comfort in aloneness whispers the dangerous truth that perhaps the crowd doesn't have all the answers after all. Watch closely how it unfolds in the small moments, the architecture of society's fear made manifest in the everyday encounters that reveal its true nature. For it is not in grand gestures that control operates, but in the microscopic pressures applied with surgical precision to keep the solitary man in line. Picture the Monday morning office ritual. Your colleagues gather around the coffee machine. Voices animated with weekend stories, parties attended, social events navigated, obligations fulfilled. Then comes the inevitable turn toward you, the pause pregnant with expectation. So what did you do this weekend? The question appears innocent, but beneath its surface lies a trap. Answer truthfully that you read, reflected, enjoyed the silence of your own company, and watch the energy shift. The subtle frown, the forced smile, the quick pivot to someone else's more acceptable narrative. You felt it, haven't you? The way your honest answer lands like a stone in still water, creating ripples of discomfort that spread through the group. It's not anger exactly, but something more insidious, a quiet judgment wrapped in concern. You should get out more, they say, as if your contentment were a symptom requiring treatment. Notice how they never ask why you enjoyed your solitude, never inquire about what you discovered in the silence, never wonder what insights emerged from your reflection. The content of your solitary experience is irrelevant. Only its deviation from the social script matters. Their response reveals that your weekend wasn't wrong because it harmed you. It was wrong because it didn't need them. Consider the workplace lunch invitation, delivered with practiced casualness but weighted with expectation. We're all going to that new place downtown. You should come. Note the phrasing not, would you like to come? But you should come. The language itself betrays the underlying assumption that your preference for eating alone is a problem requiring correction, not a choice deserving respect. When you decline politely, without malice observe the micro-expressions that follow. The moment of surprise, as if your agency to choose were somehow unexpected. Then the probing, why not? You never come. The accusation embedded in concern, the suggestion that your pattern of selectivity is antisocial rather than intentional. They transform your boundary into their wound, your autonomy into their rejection. And here lies the brilliance of social control. It operates through the language of care. We're worried about you becomes the weapon used to bludgeon your independence. It's not healthy to be alone so much, becomes the diagnosis applied to your contentment. They position your solitude as a pathology and their intervention as medicine, making resistance seem like symptoms rather than self-awareness. Watch how they escalate when gentle pressure fails. The jokes begin, there goes our hermit again, designed to shame through humor. The stage conversations about that weird guy who never joins anything, performed loudly enough for you to hear. The false concern expressed to mutual acquaintances, I'm worried about him. He's so isolated. But perhaps most revealing is their response when you appear genuinely unaffected by their campaigns. When your mood remains stable despite their disapproval, when your performance at work doesn't suffer from your social selectivity, when your life continues to flourish without their validation, then the mask slips entirely. They become angry, not disappointed or concerned, but genuinely angry. Because your thriving in solitude exposes the lie they've built their social compliance upon, that connection is mandatory for well-being. That group participation is essential for success. That isolation inevitably leads to dysfunction. Your evidence-based contradiction of their beliefs becomes an intolerable threat to their worldview. Jung understood this dynamic with piercing clarity. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Your acceptance of your solitary nature forces others to confront their rejection of their own. Your peace with aloneness highlights their restless dependence on others. Your selective socializing reveals their indiscriminate people-pleasing. You become a mirror reflecting back everything they've denied about themselves. Notice, too, how the pressure intensifies around socially mandated events. The office holiday party becomes a test of your loyalty. The team-building retreat becomes a measure of your commitment. The group happy hour becomes an assessment of your belonging. Miss too many, and whispers begin about your attitude problem or lack of cultural fit. They never question why attendance at these events should be correlated with professional competence or personal character. They never examine whether someone who excels at their actual work might have different social needs. They never consider that forcing group activities onto naturally solitary individuals might be as counterproductive as forcing solitary activities onto naturally social ones. The assumption operates at the level of religious dogma. Participation equals virtue. Withdrawal equals defect. But here's what they cannot grasp. Your resistance to their social programming isn't rebellion, it's recognition. You see through the elaborate theater they mistake for genuine connection. You recognize that many of their gatherings are performed obligation rather than authentic desire. You understand that the constant pressure to join everything is not about inclusion, it's about conformity. The man who loves solitude has learned to distinguish between relationships that nourish and activities that drain. He sees that much of what passes for socializing is actually a form of emotional labor managing others' expectations, performing enthusiasm he doesn't feel, validating choices he wouldn't make. His selectivity isn't antisocial, it's self-preserving. And this is precisely what unnerves them. Your ability to opt out reveals that much of their participation is chosen not from joy but from fear of being talked about but being excluded, fear of being labeled difficult. Your calm refusal to play by these rules exposes how much of their social life is driven by anxiety rather than authentic connection. In the end, their pressure campaigns reveal far more about them than about you. Every guilt trip exposes their emotional manipulation. Every concerned comment reveals their need to control. Every joke at your expense shows their discomfort with your independence. They project their fears onto your choices because facing their own would require the very courage you've already demonstrated, the courage to be authentically yourself, regardless of others' approval. Your solitude becomes their mirror, your independence, their judgment, your contentment, their accusation. And rather than learn from your example, they would rather eliminate the evidence. Rather than question their assumptions, they would rather pathologize your alternatives. Rather than examine their own choices, they would rather fix yours. This is the true face of society's fear, made manifest in 1,000 small encounters, 1,000 subtle pressures, 1,000 quiet attempts to bring you back into the fold, not for your benefit, but for their comfort. And now we arrive at the deepest truth that Jung glimpsed but society refuses to see. The man who loves solitude is not an aberration to be corrected, but an essential force in human evolution. He is what we might call a scout of consciousness, one who ventures into territories of being that others fear to explore, returning with maps of possibility that expand the boundaries of what it means to be human. Consider this from nature's perspective. In every species, there exist individuals who operate differently from the herd. While the majority clusters together, following established patterns and well-worn paths, a small percentage breaks away. They explore new territories, test different strategies, discover resources that the group never knew existed. Without these explorers, species stagnate. With them, they evolve. The human species is no different, except that our evolution is not merely biological but psychological and spiritual. And just as genetic diversity strengthens a population's survival, cognitive and behavioral diversity strengthens our collective potential. The solitary man represents this essential diversity, a different way of processing reality, of finding meaning, of relating to existence itself. But here lies the profound irony. Society fears and resists the very individuals who push its boundaries forward. Every breakthrough in human consciousness, from the philosophical insights of ancient hermits to the scientific discoveries of obsessive loners, has come from minds willing to venture beyond the comfort of consensus. Yet when these individuals appear among us, living differently, thinking independently, choosing solitude over conformity, our first instinct is to pressure them back into line. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, is not just a personal journey, but a collective necessity. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, he wrote, recognizing that authentic individuality serves not just the self, but the whole. When someone fully actualizes their unique potential, they add something to human possibility that never existed before. The man who loves solitude is engaged in this essential work. By learning to thrive alone, he expands our understanding of human resilience. By choosing depth over breadth in relationships, he models what authentic connection actually looks like. By resisting the pressure to conform, he preserves the possibility that alternative ways of being are not just valid but valuable. Think about what he discovers in his Solitude insights about the nature of contentment that consumer culture desperately wants to suppress. He learns that happiness doesn't require constant stimulation, that fulfillment doesn't demand endless acquisition, that meaning doesn't depend on external validation. These realizations, lived rather than merely theorized, become a form of quiet rebellion against systems built on manufacturing dissatisfaction. Every time he chooses silence over noise, he demonstrates that peace is possible in a culture of chaos. Every time he finds joy in simplicity, he proves that complexity isn't necessary for satisfaction. Every time he maintains his center while others spin in social anxiety, he shows that stability can be generated from within rather than borrowed from others. But the implications go deeper still. The solitary man's comfort with his own company suggests something profound about human nature that modern society has forgotten. We are not as desperately social as we've been conditioned to believe. The terror of being alone that drives so much of contemporary behavior, the compulsive networking, the fear of missing out, the addiction to constant connectivity, may be learned rather than natural. His existence raises uncomfortable questions. What if much of our supposed social need is actually social programming? What if the anxiety about being alone is culturally manufactured rather than biologically essential? What if the constant pressure to connect, share, participate, and belong is not serving our deepest well-being, but preventing us from discovering it? These questions threaten entire industries built on human insecurity. If people could be genuinely content with less social stimulation, what would happen to the entertainment complex that profits from their restlessness? If they could find meaning in contemplation rather than consumption, what would happen to the economic systems that depend on their perpetual dissatisfaction? If they could generate their own validation rather than seeking it externally, what would happen to the social media platforms that monetize their need for approval? The solitary man, simply by being authentically himself, represents a dangerous possibility that human beings might need far less than they've been told they need. His contentment is a form of economic heresy, his independence a challenge to systems of control, his inner directedness a threat to industries that profit from outer directedness. Jung recognized that every individual who achieves genuine wholeness makes it easier for others to do the same. Consciousness, he believed, is contagious. When someone demonstrates that anxiety can be overcome, that meaning can be self-generated, that happiness can be independent of circumstances, they create a field of possibility that others can enter. This is the solitary man's ultimate gift to humanity, not his discoveries, not his creations, not his innovations, but his very existence as proof that different ways of being are possible. He serves as a living reminder that the current social configuration is not inevitable, that the accepted definitions of normalcy are not absolute, that the boundaries of human experience are far more flexible than most dare to imagine. Every person who learns to love solitude expands the template of human possibility. Every individual who chooses authenticity over approval adds to the collective courage. Every soul who dares to be genuinely different creates permission for others to explore their own uniqueness. In the end, the man who loves solitude is not running from humanity. He is running ahead of it, scouting territories of consciousness that the species will eventually need to explore. His journey into the depths of his own being maps pathways that others will someday follow. His comfort with aloneness prepares humanity for a future where inner resources matter more than external connections. Society fears him because it senses, at some unconscious level, that he represents its own future evolution. He embodies capacities that dormant within the species, the ability to be self-sustaining, self-validating, self-directing. His life whispers the possibility that human beings might be far more resilient, far more complete, far more magnificent than our current social arrangements allow us to believe. And perhaps this is why his quiet contentment feels so threatening, not because it's wrong, but because it's right. Not because it's unhealthy, but because it's so healthy it exposes how much of what we call normal is actually dysfunction. Not because it's antisocial, but because it's genuinely social in the deepest sense, contributing to human evolution, not by following the crowd, but by showing the crowd that there are other directions to go. The man who loves solitude is humanity's gift to itself, a reminder of possibilities we have forgotten, capacities we have neglected, and potentials we have barely begun to explore. In choosing to be authentically himself, regardless of others' approval, he performs the most social act possible, expanding the definition of what it means to be human. And so we return to where we began, to that moment of recognition when you first understood that your love of solitude was not a defect to be corrected, but a truth to be honored. The journey through understanding why society fears you, why your independence threatens others, why your contentment unsettles the crowd, has led us to this final realization: you are exactly who you are meant to be. The world will continue its attempts to pull you back into the fold. The pressure will persist, the judgments will linger, the projections will find their way to you like heat-seeking missiles aimed at your peace. But now you understand what you are truly facing. It is not personal rejection, it is existential fear. It is not concern for your well-being, it is anxiety about their own. It is not love trying to save you, it is fear trying to contain you. Jung spent his life mapping the territories of human consciousness, and he understood that the greatest courage required of any individual is the courage to remain themselves in a world that profits from their conformity. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, he wrote, knowing that this privilege comes with a price that most are unwilling to pay. You have already paid that price. In choosing solitude over shallow connection, authenticity over approval, depth over distraction, you have chosen the harder path, the one that leads inward rather than outward, the one that builds character rather than reputation, the one that serves truth rather than convenience. And in doing so, you have claimed your birthright as a fully individuated human being. The man who loves solitude stands as living proof that the human spirit need not be enslaved to the opinions of others. That happiness need not depend on external validation. That meaning can be self-generated rather than borrowed from the crowd. Your existence is an act of quiet rebellion against every system that profits from human insecurity, every ideology that demands conformity, every voice that whispers you are not enough as you are. But your rebellion is not one of anger or bitterness. It is the gentle insurrection of someone who has found peace within themselves and refuses to trade it for the chaos others mistake for connection. It is the quiet revolution of a man who has learned that the most radical act in a world of performance is simply to be genuine. You are not broken. You are not missing something essential. You are not failing at being human. You are succeeding at being yourself, and that success threatens those who have forgotten what authenticity even looks like. Your wholeness exposes their fragmentation. Your self-sufficiency reveals their dependence. Your peace highlights their restlessness. Do not let their discomfort become your problem. Do not let their projections become your burden. Do not let their fear of aloneness convince you that your love of solitude is somehow flawed. You have found something precious and rare, a way of being that generates its own light, its own warmth, its own meaning. Guard it carefully. The world needs more people like you, not fewer. It needs individuals who think for themselves, who can be alone without loneliness, who choose relationships that enrich rather than drain, who refuse to participate in the endless theater of performance and pretense. In a culture drowning in noise, your silence is sacred. In a society addicted to external validation, your self-sufficiency is revolutionary. In a world terrified of genuine solitude, your embrace of it is an act of courage that serves not just yourself, but humanity itself. So continue walking your path. Continue honoring your need for solitude, your preference for depth, your choice of authenticity over approval. Continue being the man who loves solitude, knowing that in doing so, you expand the possibilities of what it means to be human. Your life is not a problem to be solved. It is a gift to be lived. And to those who recognize themselves in these words, who have felt the weight of society's disapproval for their solitary nature, who have questioned whether their love of aloneness marks them as defective, know this: you are part of a sacred lineage of individuals who dared to be themselves in a world that demanded conformity. You stand with every philosopher who thought alone, every artist who created in solitude, every innovator who trusted their inner voice over the outer chorus. Your solitude is not selfish. It is essential. Your independence is not antisocial. It is authentically social in the deepest sense. Your peace is not withdrawal. It is arrival. You have arrived at the place Jung pointed toward throughout his life's work, the place where you can say, without apology or explanation, "This is who I am." And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful and terrifying truth of all. You are enough, exactly as you are, in all your solitary magnificence. The world's inability to understand this says everything about the world and nothing about you. Keep walking your path. The world needs your example more than it knows.